Antman and the Wasp Quantumania finally comes into theaters this week, and it's time to dive in and rank the entire Ant-Man trilogy from worst to best. We have 3 films to rank, and this is just the start of the MCU week of videos. We have this ranking, we have an MCU ranking, we're going to be ranking all the trilogies from the Marvel Universe in the MCU as well. So again, strap in, hit that like and subscribe button so you're not late or again missing out on any of this fun content, and of course make sure to leave your thoughts down below. But without further ado, let's dive into it. Down in last place is Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, even though this film is in last place, I actually think that this trilogy is quite consistent with exactly the same tone and fun that you can have within each and every movie. Ant-Man and the Wasp, though, came out at a weird time. It really was the palate cleanser after Avengers Infinity War. Very low stakes, barely any villains, and the villains in here are kind of not the best. There's some interesting characters for sure that are introduced in here, like Ghost, which I'm very excited to see what they do with her, and potentially in the future with them Thunderbolts. But other than that, this is kind of one of those movies that I watch, and if I'm watching it in order of all the MCU films, I'm like, oh, that's a fun palate cleanser to kind of just laugh and enjoy myself. And other than that, when not watching in that and just kind of putting it on, it's still a blast. I like how they play around with a lot of the different dynamics. I like how this is taking place after Civil War and showing where Scott Lang now is in his life on home arrest and kind of having to play with that element. I love the development between him and, of course, the Wasp and continuing that relationship. Hank Pym is still a big star in here. I love Michael Douglas in the role, and I also love that they're actually playing around with the giganticness of Ant-Man growing, as well as giving Wasp a lot to do in here. And this was actually the film that made me fall in love with Angelina Lilly as this role. I really liked her in the first movie. This is the movie that really definitively officially announced that the Wasp is here. I've always found the Wasp to be a very interesting character from the comics. It was great to see it in here now. My number 2 is Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Now, this one I expect to be very mixed for the general going audience as well as many other Marvel fans. And I say that because there is a lot to really like in this movie. But if you have seen my review, I do not think that this is a great movie. I think it's a good, solid, middle-of-the-road MCU film, and it's still a lot of fun. I really love the Star Wars vibe that they really much push through the second they enter into the quantum realm, and it very much is like Star Wars mixed with Rick and Morty, but all at the center of it, what Peyton Reed was still able to contain in such a big film is the heart of an Ant-Man film. It still is small scale, and it still keeps the little guy in the heart of it all, specifically with his relationship with his daughter, which in a way has actually been the heart and his passion, and in a lot of different elements, the reason for him wanting to become a hero and to be a better person and to get those second chances. I think Quantumania ties up this trilogy a little bit nicely. I like the ending. I didn't love it. There's some things that I definitely would have changed specifically to up the ramifications of everything coming about. Again, I need to be vague. There are 2 post-credit scenes. One that I was really excited to see. The other one also really excited. But that first one really definitively adds a little bit more layers to the movie. The visual feast in here, I think a lot of comic fans are going to absolutely appreciate. This, not all of it works, but that's the thing, is that I came away from this movie really having fun with it, but in the end of the day, looking back and finding it to be a middle-of-the-road film. And a lot of that kind of just centers into how exposition-heavy the film gets in the middle point of this. And that has nothing, like, there's 2 different pieces of exposition in this film. There's the stuff with Kang the Conqueror and what they're trying to explain with him. All of that I loved. I loved explaining, getting to learn more about King the Conqueror himself and Jonathan Majors because he's so damn good in the role. The exposition part about the multiverse and re-explaining it honestly did not work for me because we've already heard it 4 different times, and that was actually the part that really dragged the film down for me. And I think if it wasn't for that re-explaining of the multiverse, I think I would have liked this film a little bit more, and I think the pacing would have been a little bit more tightly paced. But other than that, this is a fun movie, and there's not much more to say about it. My number 1 for this entire Ant-Man trilogy is the original Ant-Man movie. I think this movie is such an underrated little gem. It's perfectly contained, and it really does feel perfectly intertwined within a Scott Lang comic book. That is, if you've ever read a Scott Lang Ant-Man comic book, a lot of them do feel into the same structure of how the original Ant-Man movie really was. And that's actually one of the things that I was so appreciated about, specifically after going back and reading a bunch of Scott Lang comics and then diving into this. Plus, it's a heist movie, and I understand each and every one of the Ant-Man movies has a heist element to it. This is definitively like the most of all of them, and Luis adds a lot of great humor to it all. I know he's an Ant-Man the Wasp, but he's even better in here. For me, this has been the Ant-Man movie that just understood what Ant-Man was. At its heart, at its core, whether it's with the humor, whether it's with the ants, whether it's with the power set and everything of that nature, and actually playing around with the different sequences. There's a lot of fun sequences with Ant-Man for sure, but this is the one that I still think kind of got that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids vibe down, and overall was such a blast. Plus, it's an origin story, and actually getting to see one person's start to now at the very end adds a lot of different layers for when we see him in Civil War. And if it wasn't for the Falcon scene, which I know I posted on Letterboxd and people like started freaking out, like, why don't you hate this? Why do you not like the scene? I like the scene. It just, I would have rather this been more of a self-contained adventure than anything else, but I understand what it needs to do to set up kind of certain things coming up in the MCU. I enjoy this film so much, and I think it's completely underrated. My Ant-Man ranking, let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are. What is your Ant-Man ranking? Again, hit that like and subscribe button for more. Tons of Marvel rankings coming up soon, and of course, until next time, stay classy.